we have instituted about 50 tax cuts, many of them going to businesses, large and small. And so the only thing that we've said is that we've got to make sure that we're not doing some of the same things that we were doing in the past that got us into this mess in the first place. So when I mentioned, for example, changes in the financial services industry, it is very important for us not to find ourselves in a position in which banks get too big to fail, and if they make bad decisions, taxpayers have to bail them out, or we let the entire economy collapse. That's not a choice that I want any future president to have to make. And we instituted those changes. And the fact is, when FDR put in place deposit insurance in banks, banks said at the time, this is going to destroy capitalism. When Medicare was instituted, there were a whole bunch of people who said, this is socialized medicine. Now we take it for granted, but there oftentimes is this response that somehow these modest reforms that make the free market work better for consumers and for workers as well as for businesses on the front end are resisted.
Let me take it, though, to a level that's beyond policy, and it goes to what you value and you don't value.
Sure.
I think some of those in business may think that deep down you think that working for profit is morally inferior to the kind of work you used to do as a community organizer. Is that how you feel?
No, it isn't. Look, in every speech, every interview that I've made, I've constantly said that what sets America apart, what has made us successful over the long term, is we've got the most dynamic free market economy in the world. And that has to be preserved. That has to be preserved. We benefit from entrepreneurs and innovators who are going out there and creating jobs, creating businesses. Government can't create the majority of jobs. And in fact, we want to get out of the way of folks who've got a great idea and want to run with it. And are going to be putting people to work.
Maybe we've got one of those people right here.
I'd love to hear from them.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Ted Brassfield. I'm 30 years old. I recently graduated law school. And I went back to law school in order to pursue a life of public service, like you have. And what I found was that there aren't jobs out there right now. I took advantage of the loans that you were just speaking about, but I can't make the interest payments on those loans today, let alone think about getting a mortgage, having a family, having even a marriage. It's awfully expensive. And so
I'm not going to comment on that. Let me just say that whatever the expense, it's worth it. I want that on record.
Like a lot of people in my generation, I was really inspired by you and by your campaign and the message that you brought, and that inspiration's dying away. It feels like the American dream is not attainable to a lot of us. And what I'm really hoping to hear from you is several concrete steps that you're going to take moving forward that will be able to reignite my generation, reignite the youth who are beset by student loans. And I really want to know, is the American dream dead for me?
Absolutely not. Look, we still have the best universities in the world. We've got the most dynamic private sector in the world. We've got the most productive workers in the world. There is not a country in the world that would not want to change places with us. For all the problems that we've got, as tough as things are right now, we are still the country that billions of people around the world look to and aspire to. And I want everybody to always remember that. Now, as I said before, what we saw happening during 2001 to the time I took office was wages actually declining for middle-class families, people treading water, young people having more trouble getting their foot in the door in terms of businesses. And so we are now having to go back to the fundamentals that made America great. And that means we've got to improve our education system. That means that we have to make sure that our markets are working in a way that is good for a broad base of people and not just a narrow base of people. It means that, let's say you use the example of student loans. One of the things that I just mentioned is that we put billions of dollars more into student loans. This was paid for now. We took this out of financial service industries that were getting essentially unjustified subsidies. They're now going to students so that your debt would be lower. And by the way, part of that law also capped your debt at 10% of your income so that you knew that you could actually afford to take out this debt and pay for it even if you had a modest salary. So we are taking these steps, but the most important thing we can do right now is to grow our economy. That's the single most important thing that we can do. And some of the measures that we've put forward, and I'm going to be fighting for, are designed to exactly do that. For example, we've said, let's accelerate business investment in the year 2011 to give a further jump start to the economy. That's something that, by the way, doesn't add to the deficit necessarily in long term, because this is depreciation that could be taken in the out years. We're just saying, you invest now, you can take it now. And that gives businesses incentives to do it. We want to give tax breaks to companies that are investing in research and development here in the United States, because the key to our long-term growth is technology and innovation. And if we can get more of those investments here, that's going to improve. The reforms we've made on education, which, by the way, have received bipartisan support, are designed to make sure we've got the best engineers and the best scientists in the world right here in the United States. So if we're doing all those things, I am confident that the American dream will continue for the next generation. What we can't do, though, is go back to the same old things that we were doing, because we've been putting off these problems for decades. And that is something that I refuse to do.
Mr. President, let me ask you a question about course correction. Sometimes a leader, even if you think you've done the right things,
right,
but if the people you're trying to lead don't think so, you've got to somehow accommodate that, just like you would in a relationship. He was talking about marriage. As you go forward, is there any way in which you want to signal to the American people that you're going to change your approach? And specifically, we're coming up to the midterm election. Have you asked your Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner, and your top economic advisor, Larry Summers, to stay with you through the end of your term, or might you make some changes?
Well, look, I have not made any determinations about personnel. I think Larry Summers and Tim Geithner have done an outstanding job. I've had my whole economic team. This is tough, the work that they do. They've been at it for 2 years, and they're going to have a whole range of decisions about family that will factor into this as well. But the bottom line is that we're constantly thinking, is what we're doing working as well as it could? Do we have other options and other alternatives that we can explore? I think one of the things that's on a lot of people's minds right now, obviously, for example, is the issue of deficits and debt. That has fanned a lot of people's concerns, because we had to take a lot of emergency decisions last year that cost money. Now, they were the right things to do. Had we not taken them, the economy would be in a much worse position. Even John McCain's former economist during the campaign has said that if we hadn't taken these steps, that we might have lost another 8 million jobs, and we would be in an even deeper hole.
And we know you have a commission that reports in December, but
right,
I think a lot of Americans may wonder how serious you are about what that commission's going to do.
Well, let me tell you, we've already identified $250 billion in cuts on the discretionary side of our budget. We've identified $300 billion worth of loopholes in our tax code that are not helping economic growth. If we just did those two things, as I've already proposed, that would make a huge difference. We proposed to freeze discretionary spending for 3 years, to start whittling down some of the debt that I inherited.
Peter Orszag, as you know, your former budget director, says that we can't afford to extend the Bush tax cuts for anyone after a year or two.
Well,
is he right?
I want to make sure I get this gentleman's question in, but I will say this. The debate that we're having about tax cuts right now, I think, really speaks to the choices that everybody here is going to be facing as we go forward. I think all of us are concerned about the deficit. All of us are concerned about the debt. Now, what we've said is that we should extend tax cuts, tax relief for middle-class Americans, like most of the audience here, because, first of all, you're the ones who didn't see your wages or income rise. Second of all, you're the folks who are most likely to spend it on a new computer for your kids, or in some other fashion that would boost demand in the economy. Everybody agrees that this should be done. All we've said is that you get those tax breaks up to $250,000 a year. After that, if you make more than $250,000 a year, you still get a tax break. It's just you only get it up to $250,000.
House Speaker Pelosi said last week.
Let me finish this, John, because I just think it's very important that everybody understand this. What the Republicans are proposing is that we, in addition to that, provide tax relief to primarily millionaires and billionaires. It would cost us $700 billion to do it. On average, millionaires would get a check of $100,000. And by the way, I would be helped by this. So I just want to be clear. You know, I'm speaking against my own financial interests. It is an irresponsible thing for us to do.
Now,
those folks are the least likely to spend it. And
so let me ask you from this angle. House Speaker Pelosi last week said you can get 80% of the revenue if you simply take away the tax cuts for people over $1 million. Are you open to any sort of compromise that would capture most of that revenue, but those people between $250,000 and $1 million would get to keep that tax?
Here's a basic principle. Here's what I can't do as president. I think I've worked pretty hard, and I have a pretty good grasp of the challenges that we face. But here's what I can't do. I can't give tax cuts to the top 2% of Americans. 86% of that money going to people making $1 million or more, and lower the deficit at the same time. I don't have the math. I would love to do it. Anybody in elected office would love nothing more than to give everybody tax cuts, not cut services, make sure that I'm providing help to student loans, make sure that we're keeping our roads safe and our bridges safe, and make sure that we're paying for our veterans who are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. At some point, the numbers just don't work. So what I've said is very simple. Let's go ahead and move forward on what we agree to, which is tax relief for 97% of Americans. In fact, actually, everybody would get tax relief, but just up to $250,000 a year or more. And let's get the economy moving faster. Let's get it growing faster. At some point in the future, if we want to have discussions about further lowering tax rates, let's do so at a time when we can actually afford it.
All right. We've kept this gentleman waiting long enough.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, it is an honor to be in front of you. My name is Walt Rowan. I am a small business owner. I'm a third-generation business owner in Pennsylvania. We are actually celebrating our 100th year anniversary because we were founded in 1910.
Congratulations. What's the business?
The company's called Susquehanna Glass, and we do monogram glassware.
Outstanding.
Yes. If you ever pick up a Williams-Sonoma catalog and buy monogram glass, you're getting the stuff from me.
Well, congratulations. And your grandfather started this?
My grandfather and his brother started the business, yes.
That's outstanding.
3 generations.
That's great.
Two world wars, one great depression, and a lot of economic recession. So we've been through a lot. What I have learned in running a small business over that period of time is that to succeed, to survive, you have to reinvest in your business. Right. It simply is imperative. The single greatest economic challenge that I face today is